Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome you to today's live webinar on the topic of B2B marketing optimization and attribution. I'm Louis Abate, Head of Marketing at RevSure, and we're joined today by special guest Ross Graber of Forrester and RevSure's founder and CEO, Tapinder Singh Dhingra. Just a few housekeeping items I wanted to go through. Today's session is being recorded. You'll receive a link to the recording shortly after the presentation concludes. And we encourage you to actively participate during the webinar. So please feel free to use the chat feature to share your thoughts and questions at any time. We'll have a dedicated Q&A session at the end, but we'll also try to address questions as we go. And with that, I want to welcome Ross up onto the virtual stage to kick off today's presentation.
And thanks a lot, Louis. And good day, good afternoon, good morning to everyone. My name is Ross Graber. I'm a vice president and principal analyst with Forrester. I focus my research primarily on marketing performance measurements. So typically, I'm working with leaders of marketing analytics, and marketing operations as they wrestle through challenges surrounding understanding marketing's contribution and communicating that back to their organizations. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we see organizations wrestling with demonstrating contribution and ensuring that marketing is optimizing its effort to deliver the maximum value to its business. So let's get started. One thing we know that is unquestionably true is that B2B marketing organizations are struggling with insights. Our data has shown this again and again. In a recent study, we saw that only 6% of B2B organizations could be classified or considered advanced insight-driven businesses. And what that means, or what advanced insight-driven businesses are those organizations that consistently rely on data and insights to make decisions. Now, why this matters is that when we look at advanced insights-driven businesses, they're 34% more likely to report growth than those organizations who are less sophisticated at using insights. What this tells me, B2B organizations are having an issue working with insights, and it's something that we've got to tackle head on. And that brings us to what we're going to cover today. To really discuss the B2B marketing insights challenge, I think it's critical that we start by looking at the shape of B2B buying today. Then I'll talk a little bit about the contribution conundrum that I see being faced by marketing leaders. And then I'll wrap up by describing what I believe B2B marketers need to know if they're going to drive superior performance for their business and for their organization. Now let's look at B2B buying. We know from our buyer study that B2B buying journeys are complex. On average, in a successful buying journey, the average buyer tells us that they found 18 different types of interactions valuable in getting to their decision. And what we could also see in this data is that these interactions were distributed almost equivalently in between the different stages of buying: discover, evaluate, commit. We also saw that those interactions distribute evenly between those which are self-guided or driven by the buyer making their own choices about where they're going to get information and how, and those interactions that are personal. So think about those interactions which might be taking place between your buyer and a sales rep or some other type of human who is providing support. Again, buying journeys, they involve a lot. What we also know, however, is that in B2B, it's groups of buyers who are making decisions. Our data tells us that on average, 15 people from the purchasing organization were involved in a successful decision. over, I'm sorry, we're seeing also that 66% of B2B purchases involved 4 or more people. What this tells us and what this needs to tell us is that as we're marketing, we are in need of capturing the attention of more than just one person. Different buyers who are members of these buying groups have different information needs as they progress through that buying journey. B2B buying, it's fundamentally shifted over the last few years. Our buyers have much more control over how they receive information and what information they want to get. They expect transparency from the vendors that they're working with, and they demand a fluid and integrated experience. The days of marketing and sales working in such a way where there are abrupt handoffs and marketing says, hey, we found somebody, sales go and take it from here. That's not how buying works these days. To support the needs of our buyers throughout the entirety of their buying journey, organizations need to be prepared to interact with those buyers through both marketing techniques, but also through the techniques of their sellers. Now, B2B marketing leaders understand that the buying landscape is growing increasingly complex, and they also appreciate that marketing analytics haven't kept up. Our recent study of marketing leaders told us that 30% of marketing decision makers felt that improving the use of analytics to measure marketing's contribution and enhance decision making was among their greatest priorities over the coming months. Marketing leaders are seeing the need to be more insight driven as core to their success. So now I want to turn to some of the techniques that we're seeing marketing organizations lean into. And I'm going to focus on 2 approaches. We're seeing some organizations leaning into a concept of sourced attribution, which is basically saying we're going to look toward which business was originated by marketing. We're going to try and assign a revenue value back to marketing based on how much demand marketing has found. And then there's tactic attribution. Tactic attribution is a different sort of approach, which looks to assign revenue values back to those tactics which were involved in the deal. And I'll talk about these in just a little bit more detail. First off, sourcing or sourced attribution is incredibly prominent. 41% of CMO dashboards across B2B rely on some type of sourcing indicator. What it's telling us is that sourcing is among the most frequently used indicators that B2B marketing leaders turn to. But you'll hear from me next, and it's my contention that sourcing or finding that initial demand is fairly incomplete. It's misaligned with what marketing needs to be doing to support buyers throughout their buying experience. And thankfully, what I'm also seeing in the data is that sourcing is on the decline across B2B in terms of its use as a core indicator of performance. And while there are a host of reasons why, I'm going to break it down into a couple of categories. First off, sourcing tends to be a fairly inaccurate view of how marketing is contributing. It's low accuracy in that it's only a proxy for what initiated demand. When we start to consider how many people are involved in buying and that buying groups are seeing 3, 4, 5, and more people involved in them, sourcing isn't really well suited to help understand how marketing's helping with those deals. It's also not very complete in terms of describing what marketing is doing, because when you consider how many marketing interactions are taking place, sourcing is not really meant to capture that. It's really geared towards helping us understand what comes first. And lastly, and perhaps this is a frustration that some of you are seeing in your organizations today, sourcing tends to be a very credit-oriented approach to understanding marketing contribution. And what it does in many businesses is it begins to create conflict between sales and marketing over who really originated demand, when the real question that marketing and sales need to be able to answer better is, what do we need to do collectively to make sure that we are winning more business, as opposed to battling over who found it? So now I'm going to turn the page and talk about tactic attribution. I want to take a slightly deeper look at this approach. And I think it's worthwhile describing exactly what I see, or what I define as tactic attribution, because it's based on a simple idea. And that idea is that every marketing tactic has a financial return that is in some way able to be calculated. And if only we connect tactic responses to deals that were successful, then judging marketing's effectiveness really becomes a math equation. And there are multiple variations of this. Some of them are single touch, some of them are multi-touch. I'll go into a few more of those next. And I find this illustration does a good job describing exactly what's taking place with tactic attribution approaches. Because what you'll see here is a visualization of a conceptual deal. And in this case, it's a deal that's been won for $100,000. Over the different stages of the purchase process, we see that our deal has involved different marketing tactics, webinars, events, site visits. First touch models simply go and say, we're going to create the math that's going to credit all of that deal value to the very first thing that took place. Last touch models are a little bit different, and they say, you know what, we're still going to be focused on a single touch, but we're now going to emphasize the last thing that happened before a certain threshold was reached. So qualification, prioritization, maybe pipeline, maybe even the last touch before a deal is won. These are all options that can be used when turning to tactic attribution models. And then we have these multi-touch models. I'm going to illustrate here an even touch model, which basically is saying, hey, there are 10 things taking place over the course of a successful deal. We're going to divide the one deal value by those 10 touches and decide that all of them add up. When we add them up, it's $10,000. $10,000 are credited for the touch. And when we look at this sort of math across a whole series of won deals, in theory, it's telling us which touches were involved in how many deals and how much relative revenue we're seeing from those deals. But as I'm sure you've experienced, the reality is a little bit more complex than this. I made a point of emphasizing a few moments ago how multiple buyers are involved in deals. So what you tend to see is that we've got multiple people interacting, doing multiple things over the course of making of the buyers making a decision whether or not to purchase. And it starts to muddy up the analytics for this. It makes it harder to apply these models and understand exactly what's taking place. Now, in my work, what I've seen is that tactic attribution tends to be a strong tool in the toolkit when it comes to helping understand parts of tactic performance. It's not quite as strong of a tool when it comes to making decisions about how best to allocate budgets, because it may very well be that the budget requirements are going to be driven by forces other than how your tactics have most recently performed. So, for example, changes in the competitive landscape in the market, those are going to drive how you think about allocation. But when it comes to contribution, tactic attribution really is not very well suited to telling that story, because effectively what it's doing is it's just giving you a view or an ability to rank tactics based on their presence or their utilization by buyers at certain points in the journey. It doesn't effectively serve as a tool to summarize how marketing is making an impact across that buying process. And it was never really intended to do that in the first place. One of the things that I've been advocating for a number of years with our clients is that we have to move past viewing attribution as a way to understand marketing's contribution, and instead using it as an analytical technique to help answer key questions that will help us then go and in turn optimize what we choose to do as marketers. Different models give us answers to different questions. So our first touch models emphasize understanding which tactics are working best to initially capture the attention of buyers. Last touch models do something different because they help us understand which tactics are most commonly the tactics there in winning in a position in the winning deals that cause an inflection point to be crossed. And even touch models, what those things are really good at are telling us which tactics are present when we win, but it also gives us a point of view into which tactics are rarely involved when we're winning. And that sort of viewpoint can help us understand which tactics may need to be adjusted or removed from our overall mixes. Now, ultimately, some of the more complex models you may be familiar with, like U-shaped or W-shaped models, these are just a reflection of, in many cases, your organization's strategy. Because what they tell us is that we're going to prioritize some touches more than other touches, that we're going to say that the first touch and last touches are important, and everything that happens in between is a little bit less so. What I find is important is for organizations to get their arms around what these models are really telling them, which is which tactics are being responded to in which positions when deals are successful. Because the more we understand about that, the better it helps us to make decisions about what we can do more of to meet our own specific objectives. Now, as I bring this to a close, I want to encourage folks to start rethinking or thinking differently about some of the options available to us as we're assessing performance. And as I work with clients around this, I usually bias my efforts toward analytics that help to drive actionability. Actionability really needs to be a primary force in what we choose to do. And one of the first things that I like to emphasize is that when we consider what we're going to do, we've got to acknowledge that B2B tactics are not one-dimensional. Every tactic that we use is being used to help advance our buyers in their decision-making process, while at the same time helping us accomplish our own objectives of ensuring that more buyers get through successfully. Now, every tactic is somewhat customized in that it needs to be for a particular audience, because not every persona, not every type of buyer responds to every tactic with the same level of importance or the same level of emphasis. And different tactics have different intentions. What parts of buying they're trying to emphasize. And I think I can illustrate this just a little bit further. For every tactic, when we're trying to understand performance, we tend to hone in on the response. Did it get a reaction? But every reaction, it has to come with some context. And that context we see as being part of a greater program objective. What were we trying to accomplish with it? Were we trying to use a tactic like this to improve the velocity of our deals because we have a greater demand objective of shortening sales cycles? Because ultimately, we're trying to answer questions about how we can make different segments more productive. Every tactic we execute operates within this type of context. And rarely are we going to see situations where single tactics are going to be driving advanced B2B purchases. This is all about ensuring that we are looking at our tactics in the context of what it is that they were trying to accomplish for us. Another thing that we have to get our arms around is the fact that our tactics give us as marketers more than one choice for adjustment. Every tactic is made up of different components. We have the delivery mechanism, which is how an idea gets to an audience. A tactic also has an asset type, which is the container which carries that idea, or the theme. And the theme is the summarization or the categorization of the ideas being categorized. And you can see here delivery mechanisms, asset types like white papers, value calculators, analyst reports, and different themes. What are the main ideas like cost savings or security? It's not enough as marketers to simply be thinking of the delivery mechanism, the way the idea gets in the hands of your buyers, because we have more tools at our disposal to ensure that we're helping buyers and we're helping get to our own organizational objectives. The different pieces need to come together. Audiences and intentions are supported through a combination of delivery mechanisms, asset types, and ideas or themes that we're carrying. I want to just very quickly show you a quick analysis of how you might think about the interplay of delivery mechanisms, assets, audiences, and intentions. And what you'll see set up here is we've isolated audiences of our CIOs and an intention of acquisition. And we start to go and look at a crosstab of how responsiveness changes when we compare delivery mechanisms and asset types, looking at different combinations. In this chart, we might see that perhaps content syndication isn't getting as much traction as some of the others, but it may be a really great tool for getting analyst reports in front of different types of buyers. From there, we encourage organizations to play with the crosstabs and then look at the intersections of themes and delivery mechanisms and themes and asset types. The idea here is that we're trying to emphasize that marketers need to be able to take a closer look at how the different combinations of a tactics element are performing for them so they can start to adjust and make the right choices. This is an area which over time has felt really overwhelming to marketers because we're looking at, or we're being forced to analyze different combinations of how the components of a tactic bundled together to drive better responsiveness and better performance. And this is really one of the areas where I see a lot of potential going forward to use technology-enabled solutions to ensure that we are highlighting much more quickly where organizations are seeing the greatest combinations of success, so marketers can then go and apply that type of learning to the adjustments that they're making to their programs. Now, as I wrap up here, I want to just leave you with a couple of recommendations. And the first one is, as we're approaching our analytics, we've got to start by acknowledging that buying today is multifaceted. There's a lot going on, and simple solutions that isolate either a first touch or only one buyer are obscuring for us a lot of the story of what's involved in success. The other thing that I'll really emphasize is we need to see organizations prioritizing actionability and optimization over the search for credit. Credit does not ensure that your organization is going to do a better job helping your buyers and putting yourself in a position where you're winning and growing. Avoid those approaches that are fundamentally misaligned with doing the things that marketers need to do to support our buyers throughout the process. It doesn't do us any good to overemphasize finding new demand if that demand is not coming through to the end of the process and winning. And then lastly, let's be really cognizant of the different choices that we have to make. To optimize performance, it's not only a question of getting the delivery mechanisms right. We can make adjustments to who we set, to who we're talking to, what we say when we get there, how we contain that idea, and how we contain those ideas. By developing deeper insights into that, that's how we're ultimately going to drive superior performance. Now, with that, I want to thank you for bearing with me, and I want to hand it over to Deepinder to talk a little bit more about how RevSure AI can help.
Great. Thank you, Ross. Really appreciate the insights. Hello, everyone. I'm Deepinder. I'm the founder and CEO at RevSure.ai. And I'll be talking about how we can think about rethinking attribution to help make it actionable, like Ross mentioned. RevSure, we are a full funnel attribution solution that helps B2B marketing teams crush their ROI and 3x their pipeline generation by applying actionable attribution across the full funnel. Now, when we think about attribution, we know traditional attribution is not working. Some of the reasons that Ross talked about, specifically related to increase in buyer complexity, buyer groups, and the need for more tactical and tactic attribution. What's happened with traditional attribution, which had a lot of promise and started off very well, is that it's been reduced to answering the question of who gets the credit. So across the organization, especially across GTM teams, there's a distrust of attribution methodology because some of the attribution methodologies, which are either source-based or very heuristic rules-based, do not really reflect the true contribution of different touches, tactics, and channels. The second thing that's happened with attribution is that it's seen as a justification mechanism for proving ROI rather than improving ROI, right? And that tends to lead to misalignment between sales and marketing because especially when marketing is handing off leads or qualified leads to sales, they need to be able to see the contribution, not just in the handoff and whether those leads are of good quality, but also how these leads get driven to opportunity and close one business. And therefore, the attribution wars and who gets the credit is essentially counterproductive to applying attribution successfully, and it becomes limited actionability and limited use, right? So that's the state of attribution today, or traditional attribution. Now, if you go into particular reasons of why this is happening, those were the symptoms. But if you look at the underlying root causes, part of the reasons is that there's incomplete data capture. A lot of touches, both from marketing side, the SDR, BDR motion, as well as the sales motion, the partner motion, are really not captured. So you get an incomplete view of all the touches that are impacting the lead to opportunity journey, or if you're using an account-based motion, the account to close one and opportunity journey. Most of the attribution methodologies, they limit themselves to marketing campaigns, which therefore tends to sometimes overplay the role of the marketing campaign and the marketing touches and underplay the role of other touches that were involved in progressing opportunities. So it does not really capture, it's not designed to capture the synergies across the marketing motion, the SDR, BDR motion, the AE motion, as well as any other partner motion that one might have. And then as new motions and hybrid motions are gaining steam with a combination of inbound, outbound, PLG, sales-led motion, a lot of these methodologies, the tool sets, the data capture mechanisms really don't adapt to hybrid GTM motions. And lastly, a lot of the rules-based attribution methods, they're based on a lot of assumptions. They don't capture the complex online and offline buyer journeys. So you might have some data from online, but if you're not capturing offline buyer journeys, then that essentially puts a doubt on the attribution measurement and the results. What that leads to is that the actionability around attribution is limited. There is ROI reporting, and some of the reporting is useful, but then how does it kind of help you take the next action, the next touch? How do you plan campaigns for the next quarter, for the next month? It's disconnected with day-to-day funnel management and funnel tactics. So if you have a lead lifecycle, account lifecycle, opportunity lifecycle setup, how do you use attribution insights, and can you use them in day-to-day funnel management? And usually the answer is no, because the insights are not as granular as one might want to, as well as they're backward looking. So you might not have forward looking recommendations from attribution. And then there are limited insights across segments, personas, and regions. And lastly, you're not able to quantify contribution of campaigns, and not just to pipeline and ROI, but how are they driving velocity is one of the key points that Ross made in his presentation. Is how do you measure the impact in terms of conversions and driving velocities at different stages of the funnel, not just measuring pipeline and revenue, or not just measuring leads or MQLs. So that's why attribution is not working. Now, we should also accept that there have been recent advances. Multi-touch attribution methods like U-shape, W-shape, and other methods that use tactic attribution and give different credits to different touches across the journey of a lead in its conversion journey from visitor to lead to opportunity and pipeline. That has really helped figure out, especially for different kinds of motion, which touches are good at bottom of the funnel, or which touches are great at top and middle of the funnel, and how different campaigns are valuable and how are they contributing. I think there's been great advance in measuring measurement to pipeline and close one. So attribution methodology helping measure booking contribution and pipeline contribution, not just leads and MQLs. And I think there have been some good advances of making attribution a bit more granular, so you can have content level decisions and what assets are contributing, especially on the top of the funnel, and especially on the website end, what kind of white papers, assets, videos on the website are really driving good top of the funnel conversions. Yet we still hear a lot of pain points and challenges. Right? We hear pain points around customers talking about, hey, we still need to understand the cross-funnel conversion of our campaigns, and not just our campaigns, but more granularly in tactics around ads and ad groups, creatives. We're still not able to figure out what the most effective touches, and more importantly, what the most effective sequence of touches are that helps you drive conversion across the funnel at different stages. And attribution really doesn't give that insight, because attribution, even though you might be using multi-touch attribution, is just giving you insight at the pipeline and booking contribution level, but might not be giving you insight at what campaigns are good and what sequence of campaigns and touches are good at different stages of the funnel. Most attribution solutions have a problem of death by combination. So you have a lot of touches, then how do you kind of decipher what are the most effective touches, right? So even if you have mapped the different buyer journeys, which ones are the most effective and which are the most effective statistically, and which are significant rather than just being touches that are across the board and not really making an impact. How do you accurately attribute the impactful touches? And then what are the right, here are pain points around what are the right nurturing tactics for leads, etc. And so that's what, we wanted to kind of address and think about, what if there was a better way? Attribution, you can't live with it, but you can't still live without it. And the path to contribution is to kind of focus on optimizing And attribution is still a very, very valuable analytical tool. But there is a need to change the mindset with which we approach it. And what we've done here is we've thought about these 5 dimensions. What if we could change the scope? Think about the scope of attribution, the kind of campaign touches, tactics that it addresses. What is the key focus? What business question we want to answer? Is it just about measuring contribution, or is it just about a backward-looking justification, or can we change it to a forward-looking approach? What results can it provide us? How timely can it be compared to the quarterly or the monthly report? And what are the key dimensions of actionability and the levers of actionability that it can provide us? So what I'll do here now is step through each one of these and see how attribution can be made more actionable and how we can rethink attribution not only as a tool for marketing, but it's how it can be enabled through better analytical methods to enable this transformation. So the first aspect is scope. Mostly the scope of attribution in the organization has been marketing campaigns and measurement of closed pipeline and revenue sourced, like Ross mentioned, or influence more based on tactic attribution. But what if we could change that? What if we could not just look at marketing campaigns, but also look at all activities, touches that are happening across the funnel? Because the fact is, each touch has some contribution to converting a visitor to a lead to pipeline and close won revenue. And not only include all of the campaign touches and activities, but also can we measure not just pipeline and sourced or influenced revenue, but can we measure the impact of campaigns and how it accelerates stage-to-stage conversions across the funnel and the buyer journey? Because different campaigns have different roles at different stages of the funnel. And so we want to assess the role of each campaign touch as well. Now, how does this get done? The first is to think about integrating data from across the GTM funnel, from the end-to-end revenue funnel. So here is an example of an illustrative example of an end-to-end revenue funnel. This is for a lead-based motion, but you could have a similar illustration for an account-based motion with account life cycles, with buying groups, and then converting and converging into opportunities and close won business. But the key here is, can we actually integrate data, not just from marketing automation, but from CRM, marketing automation, all the paid marketing systems, the sales automation tools where all the BDR touches might be happening, and also some of the AE campaigns might be happening, as well as the buyer intelligence and the ABM platforms where programmatic advertising and any other platform. This is just a sample view of the tools. If one is running personalized targeting through other platforms, bring all of this in so you can then harmonize all of this data into one data graph or one data platform that connects all of the activities, campaigns, accounts, leads, opportunities into one view. What then allows us to do, and what allows the organization to do, is to map and connect the end-to-end journeys of every lead, account, and opportunity across, from the start website visit, which might be anonymous, to then looking at all the interactions along the way for stage-to-stage movements, and all the interactions and touches that are not only marketing touches, but also SDR, BDR touches, AEs, the calls, cold calls, sequences, AE touches, and etc., and partner touches. So now that you have that, you can then do this at the most granular level and then aggregate it to higher aggregate buyer journeys. What are the most effective buyer journeys from stage to stage, and what are the touches in those buyer journeys? But like I said, you don't want death by multiple combinations or infinite combinations. You want to tease out the most in these buyer journeys. What are statistically the most effective touches that drive conversion from stage to stage, right? And that's what a next-gen actionable attribution methodology enables. It brings all of this data together, maps the journeys, aggregates the journeys, and then analyzes statistically and using AI methods and machine learning methods, what are the most effective touches at each stage, from stage to stage conversion across the funnel, and then can truly and accurately help you attribute the impact of each touch. That's the first thing. That is around the scope. The second aspect, which is around what should be the focus of attribution. Should it be who should or what should get the credit? But why not only looking back who should get the credit, but what should we do? What activities are predicted to maximize your pipeline and maximize conversions for upcoming quarters? And that completely changes the perspective of how you use the attribution insight. Rather than just using it for contribution and proving value and ROI, which are very important, staying away from the credit wars, one should be able to use attribution insights for looking at what to do next, right? Can attribution predict future campaign touch channel performance? And that's what an AI-based attribution methodology could help you do. So for example, in this view, for every channel, in this case channel, but this could be at the campaign level, tactic level, asset level, interaction level, what is not only how much pipeline that you've generated or how much booking you've generated, but what is it predicted to generate? If you know what a channel or touch or a campaign is predicted to generate in terms of pipeline and revenue with a forward-looking perspective, then you can make the right decisions as to what channel to invest in, what campaign to run, what tactic to execute, right? And not just what is the predicted booking value and the pipeline value, which is forward-looking, but also understand its full funnel impact, not just the impact at the pipeline and the closement level, but what is the impact across the funnel at every stage of the funnel, from lead to MQL to pre-sal to sal, pipeline, and close one, in this case, for this in this example, and then understand how each channel campaign type is impacting at every stage of the funnel in terms of conversions. What this does is completely change the perspective of attribution, not only in terms of helping you figure out what was the contribution of a campaign, which was backward looking for the past quarter or the past month, but also helps you figure out what is it going to be in the future, so then you can make the right decision. If a particular campaign is not predicted to perform well, or is, it's kind of run through its course, there's no reason, keeping running it, or no reason investing in a particular channel. You can change that and you can make forward-looking decisions. So that's the aspect around focus. How about measurement timeliness? Can we think differently about measurement timeliness? And here it's really what happens with most attribution methodologies is that they are backward looking. The measurement is quarterly, or you have to wait until the end of the campaign to really measure the performance of the campaign, right? And then you take decision. By that time, you've already invested in that campaign and you had no way to course correct. What if you could change that perspective with real-time telemetry and attribute, track, predict campaign performance in real time, forward looking, not only measure what it has performed until now, but how it's going to perform in the next few weeks or the next couple of months. And then you can know which campaigns to increase, stop, or continue. You can pivot early in quarter while the campaign is running, course correct, reallocate, rather than wait till the end of the campaign. And so here, for example, in this example, you're looking at different campaigns or campaign types. You're able to track the performance of the campaign in real time. It is predicting the ROI of the campaign, and it's giving a recommendation of whether you want to increase more spending, you want to stop, do you want to wait or watch, so that you need to be ready to kind of reallocate or stop, or you want to continue, right? If attribution could give us this insight, then we can pivot campaigns, reallocate, make the right decisions around increasing, stopping, or continuing campaigns, and maximize pipeline ROI in real time rather than waiting for the end of the quarter. Lastly, what are the results that attribution can provide us? Is it only about measurement, or can it also help us figure out where to double down on and how to reallocate spend? What is the reallocation potential? I have a budget freeze or I have a budget cut. Where should I reallocate my spend? What are my top performing campaigns? What are my bottom performing campaigns? What if I reallocated spend? What is the reallocation upside potential? How much will that increase my pipeline ROI? How much will it increase my booking ROI? And if attribution can help us do that, then we are using it not just for who gets the credit. We are really going to be using it for making forward-looking decisions, where to double down on, how to reallocate, when to pivot, and maximize our complete actionability around that across at the campaign level, but also with next best touch. So what if attribution, and this is the final aspect, not only just help us reallocate, give us campaign predictions, reallocate spend, help us understand where to increase spend, where to decrease, but what if it could also at the most granular level of actionability, which is at the lead, at the account, or at the opportunity level, give us prescriptive recommendations as to what is the next best touch based on the unique journey of a lead or of an account. Can attribution give us, hey, what is the next best touch for this particular lead, right? Should we invite them to a webinar? Should we run an SDR interval sequence? Should we run a nurture email? What is the next best touch that will drive this lead's conversion from one stage to the next, right? Based on this action, what pipeline conversion propensity it can give us. And if we have that from attribution, then it helps us make decisions, not just at the campaign level, at the channel level, but at the most granular lead account and opportunity level. And so with that, one of the key things, across understanding across these dimensions of focus, scope, actionability, measurement, and results, attribution is now going through a transformation. The traditional attribution, which was really about backward measurement and was really about credit wars and assigning the credit to campaigns, to teams, is now no longer useful enough because it doesn't give you actionability. What we need to move to, and there is attribution methodology that enables you to do this, is a mindset that uses attribution with predictive intelligence and next best action, the next best actionability to help you maximize pipeline ROI and performance. So as a summary, that's our approach, and that's how we think attribution needs to be rethought. Attribution 1.0 was really about measurement. Attribution 2.0 is really about actionability. Thank you, and thanks for listening. Over to Louis.
Thank you both. I think this is highly educational. Definitely a lot there. I think, we've got about 10 minutes left here, so I'd like to go over to some Q&A. I'm just going to look through some of the questions here. First one we have up is, we're about to enter a world with far fewer cookies. How will marketing attribution software contend with this new reality? I don't know, Ross, do you want to take that one?
Sure, I'll take a swing at it from the standpoint of what it is that marketers need to expect as far as a change and where it's going to make a big difference and maybe where it's not. So traditionally, attribution systems have been based around understanding direct responses from people who are resolvable. Meaning at some point over the course of the journey, we figure out what account are they associated with, what opportunity are they associated with, who are they? A lot of that data has historically been derived from first-party sources. That's not going to change. So my expectation is that piece of it is going to continue working in a very similar fashion to how it's been working previously. Now, what is going to change is the ability to see data coming from third-party providers about who's involved and how do we resolve those folks. But there's an argument to be made about that data wasn't nearly as complete as many folks thought it was in the past. What I typically recommend to clients is that we double down on what it is that we have and what we can use. And so much of that is oriented around understanding the accounts and opportunities we're targeting, understanding that behavior of the people that we have the ability to continue to reach, and making sure that we are doing our absolute best to offer them the next best interaction that's going to help them get the answers that they need to move through the buying process in a really efficient way. So that's my point of view. Deepinder, I know you see this from as you probably have a different perspective or entry point into it.
Yeah, so no, thanks for that, Ross. Our perspective is that although third-party cookies are going away, first-party cookies are still valid, like you mentioned. And there's a lot of data in the first-party cookies and new methods around anonymous visitor identification, fingerprinting of visitors, being able to track more granularly digital impressions from personalized targeting systems, but also by deploying your first-party SDKs better at every stage of your website and every stage of the different campaign workflows. Now that itself, makes the dark funnel not that dark anymore. So even though third-party cookies are going away, there's still a wealth of information that can be leveraged in this world to make better decisions and get better intelligence.
It's great. All right, we'll go to the next one. So this question is for Deepinder. On the measurement timeline side, you mentioned getting visibility into which campaigns to start, stop, continue. What data is that information based on? Is it MQL generation, SQL, opportunity? Every campaign has a different purpose. So I'd like to know how that comes into play with those recommendations.
Yeah, that's interesting. In fact, you can configure the recommendations, and the recommendation can be contextual to the role of the campaign. So ultimately, you want every campaign to contribute to pipeline. So based on predicted pipeline value potential, as well as how the campaign is producing impact at the right stage of the funnel, if it's about generating MQLs or SQLs or opportunities, right? You can actually track its performance in real time along with its predicted performance. And then the recommendation then it takes a composite of these considerations to tell you whether you want to increase spend, because there's a lot, it has performed very well and there's a lot more it can perform for you for that particular role. And then it'll tell you to increase spend, or it'll tell you to stop because performance has really not been that great as you expected, and it's not been predicted to perform very well because the kind of leads and accounts and opportunities that it's kind of touching and interacting with are really low quality, that have very low potential to convert. And so it'll automatically tell you to stop those. So that's the data, and those are the predictions that it uses, both real-time tracking as well as forward-looking predictions in real time to give those recommendations.
Hey, and if I can, I want to jump in here because I think there's also some really low-lying fruit out there at a lot of organizations, because one of the first, and I'm going to pick up on some of the things that you introduced here, Deepinder, but the first thing is, if we know that our tactics are supposed to be getting some sort of response and they're not, that is our first low-lying fruit. And as much as we can look at traditional attribution not meeting much of its promise, one of the things that it's fairly good at is telling you which tactics have not been associated with deals. And for organizations to go and inspect or investigate those bottom 10% for revision or reduction, that's a really great starting point. The other thing that I think is just so key is we have to continuously consider our tactics relative to what it is they're supposed to accomplish. Why did we do them in the first place? Because we can't answer those questions about are we getting enough MQLs or SQLs or opportunities unless our process supports an understanding of what this tactic was supposed to do in the first place. an extensive portion of the work that I do with clients involves encouraging them how to plan in such a way that makes sure that they're calling their shot. Why are we investing in more activation or acquisition of demand? Who are we trying to do it with? Because when you set that up front, it puts you in a much stronger position to go and figure out, is it really working? It's working. You can tell if it's working if you have an objective for it. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for B2B marketing organizations to improve when it comes to calling their shot in terms of what the tactics do. Sorry, I got a little bit animated there because I think that's a huge opportunity.
Absolutely, completely agreed. Right? If you can plan the campaign objective and then validate that the campaign objective is performing to its original intention, that'd be amazing. So you know intentionally how to execute on it. Absolutely.
That's great. I love the passion, Ross. All right, we've got time for one more question. I'm going to go to one that's a little bit more tactical. In a perfect world, my campaigns team would assign spend to every campaign in Salesforce, but that doesn't often happen. How can attribution software produce, a take on campaign spend and consideration with this data being missing?
Okay, so is that for me or Deepinder?
I think probably Deepinder might have a good take on this. I mean, ultimately, it sounds like what they're asking is we're talking about attribution software that can give you insight into campaign performance. And a lot of times from a paid side, that comes down to spend. And if you don't know how much you're spending on a campaign, it's hard to assign that credit to a dollar amount. So how does that work if you don't have that data coming into the system?
Yeah, so I think the attribution, works on two ways. One, the tactic attribution works on touches and how those touches are impacting conversions. So even if you don't have spend data, let's say in Salesforce for some of the traditional campaigns, like because for Google and Meta and LinkedIn, you can always get it from the source system. So that's usually not a problem. But for the traditional campaigns, let's say white papers and trade shows and events, right? You might not have spend data entered into Salesforce. Just the impact of that touch on different leads, accounts, opportunities, and the significance of those touches in driving conversions, those can be measured. And so you can actually attribute contributions to conversions. You don't necessarily need to attribute like an ROI necessarily. Ideally, you have the spend data, so you can actually compute an ROI, but you can attribute the contribution to conversions. You could say this white paper contributed 20% from lead to op conversions, right? And that still the attribution methodology can take to account just based on the touch at different levels of the lead account and op journeys, right? So you can still kind of attribute the value, and then it also will confirm the role to you, right? Because you were, let's say, a particular white paper or a particular tactic that you had with a particular objective was about that, or to further bottom of the funnel or middle to bottom of the funnel conversion with better education, right? To the prospect, you can kind of confirm whether it's playing that role or not. So that's how you handle it.
Got it. No, that's great. And with that brings us to the end of our webinar today. I want to thank you both. I think this has been a really highly educational session, and we'll be making this on demand for those that wanted to take a replay. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great day.
You too. Bye now.